Now on BBC News, the latest business news from across the globe. World Business Report.
Live from London, this is BBC News. More turbulence for Boeing as it faces another safety investigation in the US, this time over the 787 Dreamliner. Oil profits down. Two giants of the industry, BP and Saudi Aramco, report a drop in revenue amid lower oil prices. Self-driving, made in the UK. The London-based artificial intelligence group Wave gets a huge cash injection from global tech giants. And flying the flag for British gastronomy. Meet the British food producers spicing up their offerings for Asian buyers. Hello there, I'm Tadgh Enright with your top business stories. We're starting in the United States, where the troubles facing Boeing have become even more serious because the US air safety regulator has opened a new investigation into the aircraft maker. This after Boeing acknowledged that it might not have carried out proper quality inspections on its 787 Dreamliner aircraft. Well, this all follows another probe earlier this year into the safety of its 737 MAX planes, one of which suffered a mid-flight incident in which part of the wall of the plane blew out. From New York, the BBC's Michelle Fleury has more.
Boeing's work is once again in the spotlight. America's air safety regulator, the Federal Aviation Authority, has opened a new investigation into Boeing after the company came forward and said some employees had committed misconduct by claiming certain tests had been completed when in fact they hadn't. Now, the FAA is investigating whether Boeing completed inspections to confirm adequate bonding and grounding where the wings joined the main body of the plane on certain 787 Dreamliner aircraft. Bonding and grounding is vital on a plane because it prevents static build-up. Think of it as electrical safeguards. Boeing credited a South Carolina worker who saw something they felt was wrong on the production line and came forward and reported it. Cutting corners at work is something that many of us may have been guilty of at various times in our lives. But given the frequency with which quality control issues keep coming up at Boeing, the airline has a long way to go to regain the trust of the flying public, its customers, the airlines, as well as lawmakers.
Michelle Fleury there. Well, Boeing shares dropped sharply on the news of the new investigation. The company told the Federal Aviation Administration that it will re-inspect all of its 787 jets on the manufacturing line right now, and that it will develop an action plan to address concerns about aircraft that are already in service. Do stay with us for more coverage on this in our business programmes later in the day. Let's turn our attention now to oil, because two giants of the industry, BP and Saudi Aramco, have both released their latest quarterly results, showing a fall in profits. This as lower oil prices affect their revenue. We'll talk to our Middle East business correspondent in Riyadh in a few moments' time about Saudi Aramco. First, though, let's focus on BP. Its profits are down by 45% in the first quarter compared to the same period last year. Underlying replacement cost profit was £2.7 billion compared with £4.9 billion this time last year. Well, for more on BP, we can speak to the independent energy market analyst, Gaurav Sharma. Thank you for joining us today, Gaurav. What do you make of what we heard from BP?
I think good to be on the program. I think one takeaway is that obviously, given the high water mark of the first quarter of 2023, BP was never going to live up to it. So the profits have fallen, but they've fallen from a very high mark. Now, the question is, have they missed the forecast? They have by a considerable distance. The markets were expecting something north of $3 billion, 2.7, that's fallen well shy of it. But you see, BP is facing that classic problem that many of its peers are facing. It has to keep shareholders on side via things like buybacks and dividends, just like Total and Shell have done. Yet at the same time, it needs to demonstrate to the world that it's partaking in this energy transition and that it's somehow expanding its portfolio to include the wider energy mix. And that is the dilemma companies such as BP are facing at the moment.
Well, also today they have announced that they're extending their share buyback programme, therefore returning more cash to shareholders. And I'm sure many will question if that is at the expense of more investment in that energy transition.
Indeed, but it doesn't come as a surprise. BP is mainly doing what Shell and Total, some of its peers, are already doing. So that doesn't come as a surprise. The question is, how does the new CEO balance this expectation? Partake in the mix? Well, they've also said that they have a forward renewables pipeline of about 60 gigawatts, give or take. Yet at the same time, the production, they're maintaining production levels just to demonstrate to some of the pension funds, some of the people who invest in BP for decades, that they're not just letting go of the traditional side, the traditional energy side of things.
Okay, Gaurav Sharma on BP's fortunes. Thank you very much for that. Now over to another oil giant and one of the most valuable companies in the world. That's Saudi Arabia's state oil company, Saudi Aramco. It's also just published its latest results, showing profits for the first quarter of this year down 14.5% compared to the same period last year. Our Middle East business correspondent Samir Hashmi is in Riyadh for these results. And Samir, when it comes to oil companies, their fortunes rise and fall in line with the commodities price. So Saudi Aramco facing the same difficulties that BP is.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you look at oil prices, they have remained soft over the last year or so, and that has had an impact on oil prices. But I think for Saudi Aramco, the main reason, which they've also mentioned for the fall in profit, is lower volumes, because in 2022, around July, Saudi Arabia cut down production, and since then they have kept production low. And this was a strategy adopted by OPEC Plus. Saudi Arabia is the leader of OPEC Plus, so it took the biggest cut in terms of its production output. And that's reflecting in the numbers right now, because production has been low, volumes have been low, and prices have also fluctuated. In fact, in the last 3 months, prices actually went up, which kind of offset some of that the drop which we were seeing in profits. Otherwise, it could have been even lower, considering that for the last 1 year, prices were even below what we've seen over the last 3 months.
And of course, Samir, as a country, we associate Saudi Arabia with oil. The government there, though, has set its sights on diversifying its economy away from its reliance on oil. And that's been reflected in Saudi Aramco's plans. What more have we heard about that?
Well, that's right. Saudi Aramco has announced, despite low profits, they've announced a dividend payout of $31 billion, which is quite a significant amount considering that profits have fallen. And it has been in line with Aramco's strategy, where they have actually maintained the dividend payout. In fact, in some quarters, they've given a higher payout than the previous one, despite profits falling. Now, the main reason, or the main the beneficiary of this dividend payout, is the Saudi government, because that's the majority owner of the company, and it relies heavily, the Saudi government relies heavily on this amount to balance its budget deficit. We have to remember that Saudi Arabia has been investing in massive giga infrastructure projects. It's building a new city called Neom. It's investing in tourism, in sports. It's buying, not only investing in sports domestically, but also internationally, where it's invested in many global sports properties. And all of this being done to diversify the economy away from oil. So this dividend payout is very crucial for Saudi Arabia's economy to balance its budget, which has been in a deficit for the last 4 quarters.
Okay, Samir Hashmi in Riyadh. Thank you for that. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Fra Mauro's Mapamundi is arguably the greatest medieval map of the world, and it displays every geographical knowledge available at the time with an accuracy that is still surprising today. The author? Fra Mauro, a 15th century monk who never set foot outside of Venice. It shows cities, rivers and mountains, as well as 3,000 red and blue cartigli, annotations, written in Venetian. A contemporary viewer might need to turn it upside down, because the Mapamundi is oriented south up, like the ancient maps of the Arab world. Just few decades later, Christopher Columbus would set sail across the ocean. The Mapamundi is the last depiction of a world that was about to change forever.
Original global stories from the BBC.
Now, there's been a vote of confidence for the UK's AI industry today because the Japanese conglomerate SoftBank is leading an investment of more than $1 billion into the UK self-driving car startup Wave. The funding is Europe's largest artificial intelligence deal to date. Nvidia, along with the existing investor Microsoft, are also part of this new investment round. The London-based company develops autonomous systems for cars. That's self-driving software between you and me. Janet Moyi is head of market analysis at RBC Brewin Dolphin. Earlier I asked her about the significance of the deal.
I think this is a big deal because this is a huge investment, as you mentioned, over $1 billion, and it's the largest in Europe in AI startup so far. And also, it has been a long while since the UK AI scene has seen such a big investment. It was since 2014 for Google's DeepMind. So this is a huge vote of confidence for the AI scene, and this is what the UK actually want to become. It aspires to become an AI superpower. This is great news for the UK industry.
Great news indeed. It is a startup in a new world. We are often told, of course, AI is the future and we won't be driving our own cars in future. I wonder whether you think, from the investor's perspective, is something like this a bet or something that's very likely to pay off in the medium to long term?
To be honest, it is very difficult to say. I think the technology is maturing, and the fact that you've got some big names like NVIDIA and Microsoft who are leading players in AI, it speaks a lot of volume. But I think the most important part is the regulatory hurdle. You can get the technology, you can get the experience, but then you may not get the approval from the regulators. And if the insurance companies are not going to cover it, then it is not going to happen in real life. So there remains significant challenges, but I think the tech is really getting there.
And of course, more broadly, AI-related investments have been experiencing quite a bounce in recent times. But I suppose with any bounce, are you often worried about a bump in the road?
Yeah, I think this investment, it shows that there is very much ongoing enthusiasm in AI and autonomous driving. I think there's still very much a huge potential. We are still really at the early stages. I think AI is really enhanced by the fact that we've now got really technology advanced semiconductors provided by companies like NVIDIA. So, the runway is still very much long in the future. There will be companies that fail, but there also will be a lot of companies that will be able to commercialize on this technology and improve the lives of people.
Indeed, but it takes a lot of investment up front, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think, the large companies, the large technology companies are more likely to advance in the early stages of this AI race. That would be spillover to more tech applications and more smaller companies. But I think you need that initial investment. And I think that's why investors are more enthusiastic about the large mega cap companies in the US at this stage.
Now, when Britain left the European Union, the government said that food and drink exporters had a golden opportunity to put British food at the top of the global food menu. And Asia was one of the regions targeted because of its rising incomes and an increasing appetite for Western food. The reality, though, has been that UK food is still lagging behind its European counterparts, both in terms of sales and reputation. We sent our business reporter Nick Marsh to Asia's leading food and drink trade show in Singapore to find out why.
Hungry? Well, you're in the right place. I'm in one of Asia's food meccas. But on display is a who's who of European cuisine. And they're ready to battle it out, bite for bite.
As incomes start to rise, as tastes broaden and travel becomes more common, it's an opportunity for governments not only to sell their products, but also to promote an ideal image of their country.
Do you think of anything in particular when you think of food from Britain? Sausage, I don't know.
Quite boring, actually. Not so special.
But these cheese exporters are here to fly the flag for British gastronomy.
It's a massive job educating people because, you know, the French and the Swiss and the Italians have been doing it a lot longer than we have. And Parmesan's been around forever. So we've come in sort of fairly late. So we're having to get that message across.
And this is what they're up against.
Anyone want tiramisu?
For Italy, selling food to Asia isn't just vital for its economy, it's basically a form of diplomacy.
They're foodies, they love their food, they love their tradition. It's something we have in common, and that it's, makes easier to spread also the Italian culinary tradition around the world.
I'll try on that there. Thank you.
After Brexit, UK exporters were promised new markets.
Almost dropped it there. That is very good. You did say it was good. This is grass-fed 100% British beef. And these are the people that British producers are betting on. They want them to know, firstly, that this meat exists, and they're hoping, secondly, that they'll like it, and eventually, above all, that they're going to buy it.
The reality is that exports to Asia only represent a fraction of what Britain sells to the European Union. The UK government told the BBC that it has hosted events at trade shows in the region to try and drive demand for British food. But the suppliers, well, they don't receive any grants to attend these events in the first place. Unlike other countries, they had to pay out of their own pocket just to be here.
Which makes it very difficult to, stand out against the other European groups or other world groups that, are almost fully funded by government.
This is your VR cheese experience.
Absolutely. Would you like to try?
To keep up, British producers are having to get creative to spread the word, which I enjoyed firsthand.
I'm just cleaning the udder of a cow. Okay, I'm grating the cheese onto the noodles.
But building a reputation doesn't come overnight. Many are still finding their way. Nick Marsh, BBC News, Singapore.
Now, the entertainment giant Disney is releasing its second quarter results later today. The big focus for investors will be its streaming business, still, of course, the new frontier for the television industry. Disney Plus lost 1.3 million subscribers after its prices went up back in October of last year. Since then, Taylor Swift has been brought in to help because Swifties can now watch her Eras tour on Disney Plus. Earlier I asked Paul Verna, Vice President of Content at eMarketer, whether it's working out for Disney.
They've had a pretty good run in the last few months. Just since the last quarter, actually, they've hit some milestones. They announced this streaming service joint venture with Warner Brothers Discovery and Fox. They settled their differences, at least for now, with the state of Florida. They beat back an activist investor revolt. That was huge. They are combining the Disney Plus and Hulu content under one app. And they are about to roll out a password sharing program. And we know how well that worked out for Netflix. So I think they're putting a lot of pieces in place to deliver on the promise of bringing the streaming service to profitability by the end of this year, which is what Bob Iger has said they were going to do. So I think they're on a pretty good roll. As to what happened, some of these things that I mentioned, they're not actually going to impact till a couple of quarters down the line. So it remains to be seen what this particular quarter will bring in terms of the metrics that everybody's looking at.
For sure, and thank you for that umbrella level summary covering all bases. Let's talk a little bit more about the streaming aspect of it all, because of course Disney is a giant in the entertainment space, but it's still a pretender, arguably, in the streaming space. It's not Netflix. It didn't create this sector. And I wonder, when you mention there what they're doing with password sharing, of course, that's something which is the hot button issue of the moment with streaming. What are they doing that's different? And what are your thoughts as to how it's going to work out for them?
Well, we don't know very much about exactly how they're going to roll out this password sharing, what it's going to look like, what it's going to cost. We may hear more about that later today. They also very notably rolled out an ad-supported tier on Disney Plus. So I think both of those things are aimed at driving revenue and subscriber growth. But to your question, they really have not done anything different or innovative. They're actually following in the footsteps of Netflix, which did both of those things some time ago. So in that sense, I think Disney is playing catch up, and no, they're not the leader in this space. They clearly want to be a streaming first, digital first, direct to consumer company, but they still have a ways to get there.
Paul Werner there on the future of Disney. Let's get some other business news now before I go. The European Union has approved a $14.9 billion purchase of US steel by Japan's Nippon Steel. That decision was seen as a formality. The acquisition did face opposition, though, in the United States, with President Joe Biden saying he thinks the US steelmaker should remain domestically owned. Amazon's announced it plans to spend almost $9 billion over the next 4 years expanding its cloud computing infrastructure in Singapore. The new investment adds to the $8 billion the company's poured into the region until 2023. Amazon also announced a collaboration with the government in Singapore to accelerate the adoption of generative AI in the country. Quick look at the markets before I go. Asian indices mostly gaining, with the exception of the Hang Seng there. That's it for me. Bye-bye.
Whether you're in Washington, Wisconsin,